Having traveled from Jerusalem to Salt, and then deeper into the Belka, Gertrude Bell had already begun weaving her network of connections with local Bedouin tribes. These early encounters were the careful groundwork of a woman attuned to the delicacies of tribal power and imperial presence. From Salt, she moved deeper into the territory of the Daja, a branch of the great tribal confederations that swept across Transjordan. By the time she crossed the Hejaz Railway that now pierced the open desert, she had already marked herself not only as an outsider, but as one received, however cautiously, by the region's tented elite. Not far from the black basaltic ruins of Meshita, her party was joined by two soldiers who arrived bearing what seemed to be remarkable news from the south. The men claimed to have served in the Ottoman troops dispatched to support Ibn Rashid, the hereditary ruler of Hal and the most potent rival of Ibn Saud. Since the late 19th century, the Arabian Peninsula had been the theater of a bitter rivalry between these two houses. Ibn Rashid of the Shamar tribe had long benefited from Ottoman patronage and was seen as their key proxy in the Najd. In contrast, Ibn Saud, exiled but tenacious, had gradually reclaimed Riyadh and launched a slow-burning campaign to assert dominance. This war between empires and tribal lineages, carried out with rifles and camel columns, was reshaping the heart of Arabia, with the Saudis promoting a puritanical Wahhabi revival as both religious mission and political weapon.
Late in the previous night, two soldiers had presented themselves at the door of the cave, and, having gained admittance, they had told a strange tale. They had formed part, so they affirmed, of the troops that the Sultan had dispatched from Baghdad to help Ibn Rashid against Ibn Saud. They related how the latter had driven them back step by step to the very gates of Ha'il, Ibn Rashid's capital, and how, as the two armies lay facing one another, Ibn Saud, with a few followers, had ridden up to his enemy's tent and laid his hand upon the tent pole so that the prince of the Shamar had no choice but to let him enter. And then and there they had come to an agreement, Ibn Rashid relinquishing all his territory to within a mile or two of Ha'il, but retaining that city and the lands to the north of it, including Joff, and recognizing Ibn Saud's sovereignty over Riyadh and its extended fief.
This story, told in the stylized idiom of Arab bravado, recalled the enduring etiquette of tribal diplomacy. A man who lays his hand on the tent pole is owed sanctuary and must be received. Yet even in the wake of this unlikely peace, Ibn Rashid's name was spoken with caution by those in the camps. He was remembered not only as the last serious rival to the Saudi cause, but as a man plagued by contradictions.
I questioned many of the Arabs as to Ibn Rashid's character. The answer was almost invariably the same. Shata Jiddan, they would say. He is very shrewd, but after a moment they would add, Majnoon. But mad. A reckless man and a hot-headed. So I read him, with a restless intelligence and little judgment, not strong enough, and perhaps not cruel enough, to enforce his authority over the unruly tribes whom his uncle, Muhammad, held in a leash of fear.
The fall of Ibn Rashid, according to many in the desert, had not come from military defeat alone. Suspicion lingered over the role of the British, whose influence, though still informal, was increasingly felt in the margins of Ottoman control.
He is persuaded that the English government armed Ibn Saud against him, his reason being that it was the Sheikh of Kuwait, believed to be our ally, who furnished that homeless exile with the means of re-establishing himself in the country his ancestors had ruled.
It was into this matrix of suspicion and shifting allegiances that Bell rode, arriving at the camp of Fela-ul-Isa. He was a man of stature, not only within his tribe, but across tribal boundaries, one who had even been received among the Druze, a mountain people fiercely protective of their autonomy. The Druze, whose religion emerged in the 11th century as an offshoot of Ismaili Islam, were concentrated in the rugged highlands of southern Syria and Lebanon. For centuries, they had maintained semi-independence from central powers, whether Ottoman or earlier. In the 19th century, they had clashed with both Christian communities and Ottoman governors, resisting efforts to centralize rule. With the growing reach of Istanbul into their affairs, they'd begun quietly seeking outside patrons who might secure their autonomy.
5 years before, in the Harran Mountains, a similar question had been put to me, and the answering of it had taxed my diplomacy. The Druze sheikhs of Qanawat had assembled in my tent under shadow of night, and after much cautious beating about the bush and many assurances from me that no one was listening, they had asked whether if the Turks again broke their treaties with the mountain, the Druzes might take refuge with Lord Cromer in Egypt.
Bell responded cautiously. Egypt, under Lord Cromer, was then the primary showcase of British administration in the region. Though technically still an Ottoman province, British control was absolute. Egypt had become, in Arab eyes, the model of a functioning, just government, one that delivered peace, wealth, and law.
Namrud turned from these vexed questions to extol the English rule in Egypt. He had never been there, but he had heard tales from one of his cousins who was a clerk in Alexandria. He knew that the Fellahin had grown rich and that the desert was as peaceful as were the cities. Blood feud has ceased, said he, and raiding. For when a man steals another's camels, look you what happens.
Still, Fela ul Isa, the local tribal sheikh, was not yet prepared to invite the Ottomans to impose a formal administrative system in his territory, despite growing pressure from the Circassians and settler farmers. Ottoman reforms often came at the price of local autonomy.
Namrud was of opinion that the Belka tribes should have asked the government to appoint a Kai Makam over their district to protect their interests. But Fela ul Isa hesitated to call in King Stork, fearing the military service he might impose, the enforced registration of cattle and other hateful practices.
As these arguments passed back and forth, one theme recurred: Arab longing for the kind of governance that British Egypt represented. This admiration, ironic in its reversal of older Islamic suspicion toward Western rule, had become widespread.
All over Syria and even in the desert, whenever a man is ground down by injustice or mastered by his own incompetence, he wishes that he were under the rule that has given wealth to Egypt. And our occupation of that country, which did so much at first to alienate from us the sympathies of Mohammedans, has proved the finest advertisement of English methods of government.
That night, as Belle sat by the fire, eating with her hosts, mutton, curds, flaps of bread, she observed the simplicity of Bedouin life. Even in celebration, there was no excess.
Even on feast nights, the Arab eats astonishingly little, much less than a European woman with a good appetite. And when there is no guest in camp, bread and a bowl of camel's milk is all they need.
Later, as the stars rose above the encampment, Belle sat in quiet meditation. The desert to the Bedouin she came to see was no wilderness, but a layered city of memory and life, reborn with each new generation yet tethered to those long gone.
I looked out beyond him into the night and saw the desert with his eyes, no longer empty, but set thicker with human associations than any city. Every line of it took on significance. Every stone was like the ghost of a hearth in which the warmth of Arab life was hardly cold, though the fire might have been extinguished this 100 years.
The Arabic word for desert, Badia, does not carry the connotation of desolation. It is instead a homeland, a place of intricate use and memory.
There is no name for it. The Arabs do not speak of desert or wilderness as we do. Why should they? To them, it is neither desert nor wilderness, but a land of which they know every feature. a mother country whose smallest product has a use sufficient for their needs.